Welcome to Storytime with Pops, where every quiet story carries a hidden truth. Here, we uncover the pain of betrayal, the cost of greed, and the moment justice finally comes home. So sit back, listen close, and let Pops tell you a story you won't forget. My sister sold Grandpa's war medals while he was still recovering in rehab, then told everyone I had stolen them. The family called me greedy before Grandpa could even defend me. But in his garage, one old camera had watched the whole auction scam unfold. The first thing I noticed was not that the front door was unlocked. It was the silence in Grandpa Arthur's house. His place had always made noise even when no one was in it. The old refrigerator knocked like a bad engine. The hall clock coughed every hour instead of chiming. Wind slid under the back door and made the blinds tap the window frame. Even after my grandmother died, the house never felt empty. It felt watched over. That morning, it felt held down. I had come straight from Ridgeway Rehabilitation Center with a bag of Grandpa's laundry on the passenger seat and the smell of antiseptics still in my jacket. He had been there for 17 days after a fall in the kitchen, a cracked hip, and a doctor who kept using gentle words that scared me more than blunt ones. Cognitive strain, temporary confusion, family support. Family support meant me. It had meant me for 4 years. My sister Nora called herself busy with her boutique, busy with her church committee, busy with her husband who never had a job but always had a truck payment. She loved Grandpa loudly on Facebook and in restaurants. I loved him quietly at pharmacy counters, cardiology appointments, and nights when he woke at 2 in the morning, convinced the house was on fire because he smelled smoke from a war that ended before I was born. The shadow box hung above the fireplace. Or it had. I stood in the living room with Grandpa's laundry at my feet, staring at the rectangle of cleaner wallpaper where it used to be. The dust line was sharp. The wall around it had browned from 50 years of winter fires, but behind the glass case, it was still pale. 4 bronze hooks stuck out like broken teeth. Inside that shadow box had been Grandpa's service medals, his folded flag from a battalion ceremony, 3 faded photographs, and the letter from a man named Private Daniel's mother, thanking him for carrying her son out of a burning transport. Grandpa never bragged about those medals. He dusted the case every Friday, though, even when his hands shook, even when he forgot the day. He would run one finger along the glass and say, "Those are not mine, Ben. Those belong to everyone who never got old enough to sit in this room." I called Nora first because, stupidly, I wanted to believe there was a harmless explanation. She answered on the second ring, breathless and annoyed. "I'm at the salon." "What?" "The medals are gone." Silence, then a gasp so clean it sounded rehearsed. "What do you mean gone?" "The shadow box, it's missing." "Oh my God," her voice sharpened. "Ben, what did you do?" The question landed before I understood it. "What are you talking about? You've been in and out of the house constantly. You have keys. You're the one who handles his bills. Don't play confused." My throat tightened. "Nora, Grandpa is in rehab. I came to get laundry." And conveniently, the most valuable thing in the house disappears. She lowered her voice, which meant someone near her was listening. "You have been struggling, haven't you? Your shop hours were cut." "My hours were cut 8 months ago. I've been fine." "That's not what people say." People, Nora's favorite weapon. Invisible, nameless, impossible to question. I looked at the blank patch on the wall and felt heat crawling up my neck. "Did you take it?" She gave a small, wounded laugh. "How dare you?" The phone clicked dead. By lunch, my aunt had called me twice. My cousin had texted a thumbs-down emoji like a teenager. Nora posted a picture of Grandpa in his hospital bed with a caption about family betrayal during vulnerable times. She did not name me. She didn't have to. At 3 that afternoon, a nurse pulled me aside at rehab and said Grandpa was too upset for visitors. Through the half-open door, I saw Nora sitting beside him, holding his hand with both of hers, crying beautifully. Grandpa's eyes were wet and confused. He looked at me once, and his face folded in on itself like paper. "Ben," he whispered. Nora turned around slowly. I will never forget her face. No tears anymore, just triumph. "Maybe give him space," she said softly, loud enough for the nurse to hear. After what happened, I left with Grandpa's clean laundry still in my hands. Outside, the winter sun was too bright, the kind that makes everything look cruelly clear. I sat in my truck and stared through the windshield until my vision blurred. I knew Nora. I knew her drama, her appetite, her way of turning any room into a stage. But I did not yet know how deep she had dug the trap. I did not know the medals were already listed for auction. I did not know my name was about to be attached to a police report. And I did not know that in Grandpa's garage, above the pegboard where his wrenches hung in perfect rows, an old camera with a cracked plastic shell had been blinking red all morning. Nora arrived at Grandpa's house with 3 cars behind her, as if grief needed witnesses. By 4 o'clock, the driveway was full. Aunt came with a casserole she had not cooked. Cousin Matt brought his wife and the same suspicious look he used at estate sales. Nora's husband, Kyle, leaned against his truck in a leather jacket he could not afford, smoking beside the mailbox Grandpa had repainted every spring. I stood on the porch while they marched past me like I was a stain on the welcome mat. "Nobody touch anything," Nora announced, though she was the first to touch everything. She picked up picture frames. She opened drawers. She stood in the living room under the pale rectangle where the shadow box had hung and pressed a tissue to her mouth. "It's just so violating," she said. Aunt put a hand on her shoulder. "Your poor father." "Our poor father," I said. Nora looked at me with eyes already shining. This isn't the time to be defensive. That was her genius. She could accuse you without saying the accusation. If you defended yourself, she called you defensive. If you stayed quiet, she called your silence guilt. Matt peered into the fireplace like I might have hidden the medals under the ashes. "Ben, when were you here last?" "Monday night, to bring Grandpa's mail." "And today?" "Yes, after rehab." Kyle exhaled smoke through his nose. "That's a lot of access." I turned to him. "You don't live here." "Neither do you." "No," Nora said softly, "but he acts like he does." The room went still. There it was, the bigger story she had been writing for years. Ben the bachelor, Ben the helper, Ben the one who had no family of his own, so he had wrapped himself around Grandpa's life. In Nora's version, devotion was never love, it was positioning. Aunt frowned at me. "Your sister says you recently asked Arthur about changing the will." I stared at Nora. "That is a lie." Nora's mouth trembled. "You asked him whether the house would be easier to sell if it avoided probate. I heard you." "I asked a lawyer how to keep the county from putting a lien on the house if he needed long-term care. That was to protect him." "Convenient. You were not there." "I don't need to be in every room to know what you're doing." The worst part was that everyone, a little. They wanted a simple villain. They wanted someone to blame who was already standing in the living room wearing work boots and exhaustion. Then Officer Bell arrived. Nora had called before she called me. Of course she had. He was young, polite, and uncomfortable the moment he saw the family forming a half-circle around me. He asked questions. When did I last see the medals? Did I have financial problems? Who had keys? Had Grandpa ever mentioned selling them? "No," I said, "never." Nora sniffed. "He said once the medals should go to a museum. Ben told him museums don't pay." I almost laughed because it was so perfectly poisonous. Grandpa had said the medals belonged in a museum. I had said museums often require donation agreements. That was all. Nora had turned a practical sentence into motive. Officer Bell wrote something down. "Grandpa has cameras," I said suddenly. Everyone looked at me. "In the garage, maybe the driveway too. He put them up after teenagers stole gas cans last summer." Nora's tissue stopped moving. Kyle flicked ash onto Grandpa's flower bed. Officer Bell brightened. "Do you have access to the footage?" I frowned. "I don't know. Grandpa set it up with some old recorder, maybe in the garage cabinet." Nora gave a small, sad shake of her head. "Dad hasn't maintained anything electronic in years. The cameras are fake now," he told me. Grandpa had told me the opposite. He had told me the garage watched better than people did. But the officer looked at the cracked camera above the garage door, then at the rusted wires. and doubt entered his face. "We can check," he said. Nora stepped forward quickly. "Officer, I don't want strangers digging through Dad's garage while he's hospitalized. He's very particular and upset. Maybe later, when he can consent." I saw what she did. She made the evidence sound like disrespect. The officer hesitated. "All right, for now I'll file the report." Kyle smirked into his cigarette. The family began leaving once there was nothing more to watch. Nora, aunt in the driveway, crying again. Matt avoided my eyes. Officer Bell told me not to leave town, then looked embarrassed for saying it. When they were gone, I stood alone beside Grandpa's mailbox. Through the living room window, I could see the empty wall. Through the garage window, I could see darkness. And in that darkness, faint but steady, something blinked red. The nurses called it a bad day when Grandpa forgot the year. The family called it proof. I called it fear. At Ridgeway, Grandpa lay propped against pillows, thinner than he had been at Christmas, his hair combed too neatly by someone who did not know he hated it flat. The television played a cooking show with no sound. On the rolling table beside him were 2 cups of apple juice, a plastic container of pills, and a framed photo Nora had brought of herself with him at a Veterans Day parade. I had never seen that photo before. She had probably printed it that morning. He looked at me like he wanted to recognize me before I spoke. "Hey, Grandpa." His eyes cleared. Nobody else called me that anymore. Hearing it almost broke me. I sat down carefully. "How are you feeling?" Like they rebuilt my hip with spare tractor parts. His mouth twitched, then he looked toward the door. "Your sister says I lost things." "You didn't lose them." He stared at me. "The medals. I'm going to find them." His fingers trembled on the blanket. "They think you took them." "I know." "Didn't." "No." "Wouldn't." "No." He closed his eyes and breathed through his nose. For a minute, he seemed asleep. Then his hand moved, searching. I took it. "Garage watches," he whispered. I leaned closer. "What?" "Garage watches the liars." The words sent a chill along my arms. "The camera. Blue box, not the phone. Phone lies, blue box tells." A nurse entered with fresh water before I could ask more. Behind her came Nora, holding a paper cup of coffee and wearing the expression of a person who had caught me stealing air. "Ben," she said, "you're not supposed to upset him." Grandpa's grip tightened around my fingers. "I'm not." She moved to the other side of the bed and kissed his forehead. He flinched. It was small, but I saw it. "Daddy, remember what the doctor said. No stressful conversations." Grandpa looked at her. For a second, his face hardened into the man who once backed a dump truck through a fence because a neighbor blocked his driveway. Then the drugs dragged him back down. Nora turned to me. "The police report is filed. I told them I don't want charges if the medals are returned quietly." "How generous." "I'm trying to protect you from yourself." "Where are they?" Her eyes widened, wounded again. "Listen to him. He's attacking me at Dad's bedside." The nurse shifted uncomfortably. Grandpa murmured. I bent close. Box is under oil rags. Nora's coffee cup crumpled in her hand. "What box?" I asked. "Blue box." His eyes slid shut. "Don't let her sell my dead." The room went silent, except for the television chef chopping parsley. Nora laughed once too quickly. "He's mixing up old stories. Dad always called the medals his dead. It's morbid." He said sell, because you put that idea in his head. I stood. "Grandpa, I'll check the garage." Nora stepped into my path. "No." That one word was not sad. It was not wounded. It was command. The nurse noticed too. Nora softened instantly. "I mean, not alone. Dad's garage has dangerous tools, chemicals, old wiring. If something happened, people would say I let you tamper with evidence. Evidence, you said, didn't exist." Her smile was thin. "I said the cameras were old." I looked at Grandpa. He was asleep now, or pretending to be, his hands still curled as if holding mine. In the hallway, Nora followed me to the elevator. "You need to stop," she said. "Stop what?" "Making Dad paranoid. He told me about the blue box. He told me last week that Mom was making Mom has been dead 8 years. He was clear. He is vulnerable, and you are using that. Her voice dropped. Do you understand how bad that looks? The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. She stepped close enough that only I could hear. Return whatever you took, she whispered, and I can still make this go away. I didn't take anything. Her smile came back. Then I hope the police believe you. As the doors closed, I saw her reflection in the polished metal. Not crying, not worried. Calculating. I drove to Grandpa's house without stopping for lunch. The garage smelled of sawdust, machine oil, and the peppermint candies he kept in an old coffee can. I found the oil rags in the bottom cabinet beneath his drill press. My hands shook as I pulled them aside. There was the blue box. Dusty, warm, humming. A small recorder with one green light and one red one blinking, steady as a heartbeat. I did not open the blue box right away. That sounds foolish now, but in that moment it felt like holding a live wire. If the footage was there, it could save me. If it was blank, it could finish me. Nora had already turned grief into a courtroom without walls. She had witnesses, tears, a police report, and Grandpa's bad days. All I had was a dusty recorder humming in my hands. I photographed it first. Then I photographed the cabinet, the oil rags, the camera wires stapled along the garage beam, and the small label Grandpa had written in black marker, West Wall, Drive, Bench. Grandpa labeled everything. He once labeled ajar screws that lie about their size. I took the recorder to the kitchen and plugged it into the old television because the garage monitor had died years earlier. The screen flashed blue, then a menu appeared. Dates scrolled down the side. There were recordings from the week before, the day before, that morning. My breath caught. Before I could click one, my phone buzzed. A message from my friend Tessa, who ran the antique booth 2 towns over. Is this your grandfather's stuff? Below it was a link. I opened it and felt the room tilt. Lot 214, Vintage Military Medal Collection, Estate Find, Local Veteran Family. The auction house logo was stamped at the top. The photos were badly lit but unmistakable. Grandpa's bronze star, his campaign ribbons, the folded flag, the letter from Private's mother, cropped so the name at the bottom did not show. Auction closing Friday. Current bid, $4,850. My hands went cold. I called the auction house. A woman named answered with a voice as bright as a dentist's lobby. I need to report stolen property in lot 214. Her brightness, sir, may I have your name? Ben Walker. Those medals belong to my grandfather, Arthur Walker. They were stolen from his house. A pause, keyboard clicks. The consignment paperwork lists the seller as a family representative. Who? I can't disclose consignor information. You are selling stolen military medals. I understand your concern, but we have signed authorization from the owner. The owner is in rehab. Another pause, longer this time. Sir, the document includes Mr. Walker's signature. That stopped me. Grandpa's signature used to be beautiful, a sharp A and a looping W like wire. But after his stroke 2 years earlier, he signed slowly, each letter leaning as if tired. Nora knew that. She had watched him struggle with birthday cards. Email me the authorization. I'm afraid. Then I'm calling the police and the local news. Its brightness vanished. Please hold. I did not hold. I drove to the auction house. North County Estate Auctions sat behind a strip mall that used to be a grocery store. Inside, old furniture and dead people's dishes crowded the aisles. A glass display case near the counter held pocket watches, coins, and Grandpa's shadow box, opened like a body on a slab. Seeing it there hurt worse than the empty wall. A man in a plaid vest stepped between me and the case. Can I help you? I'm here for lot 214. His eyes flicked toward the office. You'll need to speak with. I already did. Appeared holding a folder to her chest. She was younger than her voice, with tired eyes that suggested she had learned too late what kind of business she worked in. Mr. Walker, she said carefully, we reviewed the consignment file. Show me. We can't release documents without the consignor's permission. then stopped the auction. The owner authorized sale. My grandfather did not. The man in the vest sighed. Families fight after every death. He's not dead. That shut him up. His face changed. The seller told us he had passed. My stomach dropped. Who told you? She looked at the folder, then toward the back office where someone was listening behind a half-open door. I really can't. Nora, I said. She said nothing, but she did not have to. I took photos through the glass until the man threatened to call security. Then I leaned close to. If those medals leave this building, you'll be selling stolen property from a living veteran. Her lips parted. She whispered, the auction closes Friday at 6. Outside, rain had started, thin and cold. I sat in my truck and opened the first garage recording from the night the medals disappeared. The image was grainy, angled from above the workbench. At 10:42 p.m., Nora walked into the garage, carrying Grandpa's house key. Kyle followed with a crowbar and a cardboard shipping box. And between them, laughing softly, was my cousin Matt. The footage did not make me angry at first. It made me quiet. There is a kind of betrayal that roars when you see it coming, and another kind that pulls all sound out of the world because your mind refuses to accept what your eyes have already proven. Nora stood in Grandpa's garage wearing the red coat she had worn to church that morning. Kyle carried the box like he had done this before. Matt had gloves. Gloves! That detail made me pause the video and stare until my eyes burned. They had not panicked, they had not improvised, they had planned. The camera angle caught the workbench, the cabinet, the door to the kitchen, and the side wall where Grandpa kept a spare key hidden behind a tin sign that said free coffee tomorrow. Nora knew the hiding place because Grandpa trusted her enough to tell her. She took the key, opened the inner door, and disappeared into the house. 12 minutes later, she came back with the shadow box wrapped in a quilt. Kyle said something I could not hear, then made a wiping motion over the glass. Matt laughed again. I exported the clip to a thumb drive and then to my laptop. Grandpa's ancient recorder made everything difficult, as if loyalty had to be earned. The files had names like CH032314AVI and played only after I downloaded a codec from a forum run by men who still argued about VCRs. When I finally had a copy, I called Officer Bell. He sounded relieved to hear from me until I said, I found footage. What kind of footage? Theft. Nora, Kyle, and Matt taking the medals from Grandpa's house. A pause from the garage camera. Yes. Where is it now? With me. His voice tightened. Ben, you need to bring that in without altering anything. AITA. You evidence from a potential crime scene. My chest squeezed because my sister tried to block anyone from checking it. I understand, but chain of custody matters. There it was, the small legal door Nora could use to make truth look dirty. I have the recorder too, I said. It's intact. Bring both, don't contact your sister. Too late. My phone was already vibrating with Nora's name. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, Aunt. Then Matt. Then an unknown number. The voicemail transcription appeared from Nora. We need to talk before you make this worse for Dad. Before I could leave, a white SUV pulled into Grandpa's driveway. A woman in a navy coat got out holding a tablet. She introduced herself as Sheila from Adult Protective Services. My mouth went dry. We received a report regarding possible financial exploitation and emotional coercion of Arthur Walker, she said. From Nora. I can't disclose, the reporter. Of course. She asked to come inside. I wanted to refuse, but refusal looked like guilt. So I sat at Grandpa's kitchen table while she asked careful questions designed to sound neutral and feel like handcuffs. Who paid Grandpa's bills? Me. Who had access to his checkbook? Me, because he asked me to help after his stroke. Who visited most often? Me. Who had recently argued with family about property? Me, according to Nora. Who had possession of potential evidence? Me. I showed Sheila the auction listing. I showed her photos of the empty wall. I told her Grandpa was alive and in rehab. Her expression shifted when I played 10 seconds of the garage footage, but she held up a hand. "I can't review this here. You need to provide it to law enforcement." "I'm trying." She looked around the kitchen, the pill organizer on the counter, the stack of medical bills, the grocery list in my handwriting. "Mr. Walker, I'm not accusing you," she said, "but I need you to understand something. In elder cases, the person closest to the senior is often the one with the most opportunity. I was close because everyone else disappeared." She did not write that down. After she left, I drove to the police station with the recorder wrapped in a towel on the passenger seat like a sick animal. Officer Bell met me in the lobby. I handed him the blue box and thumb drive. He asked me to wait. I waited 2 hours under fluorescent lights beside a vending machine that swallowed $1 and refused to return it. When Bell came back, his face was troubled. "The footage is helpful," he said. "Helpful, not decisive, not exonerating. But the medals were consigned with paperwork bearing Arthur's signature. We need to verify whether he authorized sale." "He didn't." "I believe you, but belief isn't a case." I laughed once, bitterly. Nora told the auction house he was dead. "That may become relevant." "Mays." Bell lowered his voice. "Ben, your sister came in an hour ago with a notarized statement naming herself family representative for personal property." My vision narrowed. Grandpa signed that. "That's the question." I walked out of the station into a dusk that smelled like wet asphalt and bad news. Nora had not just stolen the medals. She had built paperwork around the theft, brick by brick, until truth looked like trespassing. Grandpa's signature told stories. On old Christmas cards, it swept across the bottom like a flag. On checks after his stroke, it crawled. On medical forms, it shook and doubled back because his hand cramped halfway through the W. He hated that. Once, after signing a pharmacy receipt, he stared at the pen and said, "Even my name is getting old," without asking permission. That was why the authorization form felt wrong before I even saw it. I had to beg at the auction house for a glimpse. I did not get a copy. I got 3 seconds while she stood by the counter pretending to search another folder and turned the page slightly toward me. Arthur J. Walker. Smooth, confident, too straight. The A was sharp but wrong. The W had no hesitation. "It's fake," I said. Whispered, "I can't help you." "You already are." "No, I mean I can't. My boss says the consignor threatened to sue if we delay." "Nora." She swallowed. A woman and a man came in. The woman said her father was deceased, then later corrected herself and said legally incapacitated. The man kept saying the family needed a quick sale before creditors got involved. "Kyle, of course." "Did they bring the medals?" "No, another man delivered them the next morning." "Matt." She looked down. "I didn't say that." I leaned closer. "Those medals are not jewelry. They are not coins. My grandfather bleeds every time someone calls them assets." Her face tightened. "The auction is temporarily paused." Relief hit me so hard, I almost sat down. "For 48 hours, she added. "Pending documentation." Documentation, Nora's kingdom. At Ridgeway, Grandpa was sitting in a wheelchair by the window watching traffic with the offended expression of a man who believed cars should sound like cars. He looked better that day. Sharper, angrier. "Nora came," he said before I sat down. "What did she want?" "Smile." "What?" For the phone, his fingers the armrest, wanted me to say I was fine. "Did you?" He looked at me as if I had insulted him. I was in the army, not theater. That made me laugh for the first time in days. I told him about the auction carefully. His jaw worked side to side. When I mentioned the signature, he lifted his right hand and stared at it. "They use weakness like a crowbar," he said. "I'm going to prove it." "Don't prove." "Corner." Grandpa's eyes moved to the bedside drawer. Red book. I opened it. Inside was his leather pocket notebook, the one he carried for years in his shirt pocket. Nora must have missed it because it looked worthless. The pages were filled with dates, oil filter numbers, names of nurses he liked, and little reminders to himself. Near the middle, folded into the binding, was a business card. "Garrison, and Vale Estate Services. Under it, in Grandpa's handwriting, were 3 words: Nora asked value. My skin prickled. When? After Thanksgiving, he said. She thought I slept. I turned the page. He had written more. N asked medals private sale. Said Ben would understand. Do not let medals leave family until museum letter. Garage cam on. My throat tightened. You wrote this. Memory's a leaky bucket. His voice softened. Paper holds what falls out. I photographed every page. Then Grandpa grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. I'm here. She'll come sweet, then she'll come sharp, then she'll come with papers. His eyes were wet but clear. Don't sign anything to keep peace. I won't. She always thinks peace means everyone hands her what she wants. A nurse knocked and the moment broke. But when I left, the notebook was tucked inside my jacket. In the parking lot, Kyle stood beside my truck. He smiled like a man waiting outside a bar, not a rehab center. Got a minute? No. He stepped in front of the driver's door. Nora's trying to solve this without embarrassing you. She stole from Grandpa. His smile thinned. Careful. Or what? Or people start asking why a grown man with no wife, no kids, and no savings spent years hovering around an old man's estate. I felt my hands curl, move. He leaned closer. The medals are gone one way or another. If you keep pushing, Nora will make sure your name stays attached to the theft. You know, people believe women who cry. I did not hit him. That remains one of my proudest acts of self-control. Instead, I opened my phone and played the frozen frame of him carrying the box into Grandpa's garage. His face drained. Chain of custody, he said, but his voice cracked. Then he stepped aside. That was when I understood something important. Nora had paperwork, Kyle had threats, Matt had gloves. But fear was beginning to leak through their perfect story. The man who nearly bought Grandpa's medals lived in a gated subdivision named after trees that had been cut down to build it. His name was, and he collected, militaria, a word that sounded cleaner than buying other men's pain. I found him through Tessa, who knew a dealer who knew a bidder who complained too loudly online when lot 214 was paused. Had posted a photograph of the auction preview with the caption, "Finally, a real local hero set. Hope the family knows what they have." The family knew exactly what it had. It just did not care. His house had columns in front and a flagpole tall enough to be in security. He answered the door wearing a sweater vest and suspicion. I'm not discussing an active auction, he said. I'm Arthur Walker's grandson. That moved something in his face, not guilt, curiosity. I was told the family authorized sale. My sister told the auction house Grandpa was dead. His hand tightened on the door. Is he? No. Looked past me toward the street, as if the truth might be a salesman he could refuse. May I see them? I asked. I don't have them. But you saw them. At preview. What did Nora tell you? He opened the door wider, not inviting me in, only letting the air between us become less hostile. I did not speak to a Nora. Kyle, a man named Kyle, said the old fellow had wanted the medals to go to someone who respected history. I nearly laughed. Grandpa wanted them donated to a veterans museum after his death. His face changed again. This time shame found a crack. I asked about provenance, he said. They had a letter, service record copies, and a statement. Forged. I am not a criminal, Mr. Walker. I didn't say you were. I'm asking you not to become one. That landed. He glanced over his shoulder. In his foyer, a display case held bayonets, helmets, and framed letters. A museum without humility. I have messages, he said quietly, with the intermediary. Matt. He did not answer, but he took out his phone. The messages were worse than I expected. Matt had offered pre-auction assurance that the family wanted a private sale if the auction paused. He wrote that Ben was making noise because Ben expected inheritance money. He wrote that Arthur had dementia and did not understand the value of old military items. He wrote the daughter is legal next of kin and wants clean closure. Clean closure for stolen honor. Send me screenshots. I shouldn't. You should send them to Officer Bell. His mouth tightened. This could damage my reputation. Buying stolen medals from a living veteran should. He looked at me for a long moment, then once. I'll speak to the police, but I will not be dragged into family drama. This is not drama. He glanced toward his display cases. Families always say that. I left with no screenshots, only his promise, which felt like trying to hold smoke. But promises from cowards can still become useful if they fear being named. On the drive home, Aunt called. I heard you harassed a collector, she said. Nora's network worked faster than weather. I told him the truth. Ben, why can't you let the police handle it? Because Nora is feeding, everyone lies faster than I can prove them. Aunt sighed. Your sister is dramatic, but she wouldn't steal from her father. She took the medals on camera. Nora says the footage is misleading. She is holding the shadow box. She says Dad gave it to her for safekeeping, and you edited the clip. I gripped the steering wheel. Do you hear yourself? I hear a family being torn apart. It was torn when she put Grandpa's medals in an auction case. Aunt's voice softened, which somehow made it. Maybe you love being needed. Maybe this is what happens when you make an old man your whole life. I hung up before I said something that would become another weapon. That night, Nora posted again. A black and white photo of Grandpa in uniform. Caption, protecting Dad's dignity while others exploit his confusion has been the hardest battle of my life. Please pray for truth. 600 people reacted. Truth. Nora wore the word like she had stolen that too. At 11:18 p.m., my phone buzzed with an unknown number. A text. I sent everything to Officer Bell. Your cousin offered delivery tonight. I declined. Be careful. They are desperate. Below it was a screenshot. Matt's message read, if the auction is too hot, Kyle can bring the medals to your house. Cash only, no receipts. Old man won't know. Ben will take the fall. For the first time, I felt something stronger than anger. I felt the trap beginning to turn. Nora chose the Veterans Hall because she understood lighting. Not sunlight or ceiling fixtures, moral lighting. She knew certain rooms make people look innocent before they speak. Put a woman at a podium beneath flags, add a portrait of her elderly father, and every tear becomes evidence. The event was called Bring Arthur's Honors Home. She organized it in 48 hours. There were cupcakes with tiny flags, donation jars by the entrance, and a poster of Grandpa from 1969 smiling beside a Jeep. Someone had printed missing medals in large red letters across the bottom. Under that, smaller but still readable, family seeking justice after suspected theft. Suspected, another word that pointed without touching. I went because staying away would make me look guilty. I wore Grandpa's old field jacket, the one he had given me when I was 16 and too thin to fill it. Nora noticed the moment I stepped inside. Her smile faltered. Then she made it brighter. Ben, she said into the microphone before I reached the back row, I'm glad you came. Every head turned. That was the entire point. I sat beside Mr. Grandpa's friend from the VFW, who had visited him more than most blood relatives. He leaned toward me and whispered, You okay? No. Good means you're not dead. Nora began her speech with childhood stories she had not earned. She talked about Grandpa teaching her to ride a bike. He had taught me. She talked about polishing his boots. Grandma had done that. She talked about sacrifice, dignity, and the pain of seeing valuable symbols of service vanish during a medical crisis. Kyle stood near the donation jars, arms folded, playing security. Matt avoided me from across the room. Then Nora's voice broke. I don't want to accuse anyone tonight, she said, accusing me with every syllable. I only want my father's legacy returned. Applause rose, soft at first, then stronger. Mr. did not clap. Nora, her eyes. Some people believe old veterans are too confused to know what belongs to them, but my father knows. That part was rich enough to choke on. After the speech, people approached me in small waves. Some offered cautious support. Others asked questions shaped like knives. Did the police search my truck? Had I been gambling? Why did I handle Grandpa's accounts? A woman from Nora's church told me confession was healing. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked to the side table where Nora had displayed enlarged photographs of the medals. One image showed the bronze star. Another showed the letter from Private's mother, cropped again. Beside them was a donation sheet. Goal $10,000 to recover or replace stolen medals and support Arthur's care. Recover or replace. Nora was raising money off the theft she committed. My hands went cold. I took a photo. Kyle appeared beside me. Careful, Ben, people already think you're obsessed. Is that why the donation jar is cash only? He leaned close. You should have taken the deal. What deal? Stop pushing, and Nora doesn't ask Adult Protective Services to recommend limiting your visits. I looked at him. You are threatening to keep me from Grandpa. I'm saying unstable people upset, recovering seniors. Behind him, Nora, an elderly woman, and cried into her shoulder. Unstable, exploitative, greedy, obsessed. Every label was a lock being fitted to my door. Mr. joined us, small and square and 79 years old, with forearms like rope. Everything all right. Kyle smiled. Family matter. Mr. did not smile back. Arthur's family includes people who showed up before cameras did. Kyle's jaw twitched. Then something unexpected happened. Matt walked past me and slipped a folded napkin into my jacket pocket. He did not stop. He did not look back. I waited until I reached the restroom to open it. There were 3 words written in block letters. Check Kyle's truck. Under that, a number. 10:30 tonight. I stared at it until the letters blurred. When I came out, Nora was leading the room in prayer. Her hands were folded, her eyes closed, her voice trembled at exactly the right places. But across the hall, Matt stood near the exit, sweating through his collar. For the first time, one of Nora's actors looked tired of the script. At 10:30 that night, the Veterans Hall parking lot was almost empty. Rain ticked against my windshield. The flags by the entrance snapped in the wind like they wanted to leave. I sat 3 spaces away from Kyle's truck with my headlights off and Grandpa's field jacket pulled tight around me. This was stupid. That thought repeated every 30 seconds. It was stupid to follow a note written on a napkin. Stupid to believe Matt, who had laughed while carrying Grandpa's shadow box through the garage. Stupid to sit alone in the dark while people who had already framed me might be waiting to frame me again. But then the side door opened. Kyle came out first, carrying a cardboard box. Nora followed with the donation jars in a tote bag. Matt came last, empty-handed, looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him. They argued near the truck, voices low but sharp. I cracked my window. We should have moved them yesterday, Kyle said. Nora snapped, lower your voice. The buyer backed out. He got scared because Ben ran his mouth. Matt said, maybe because we stole from a living veteran. The silence after that was so sudden I could hear rain in the gutters. Nora turned slowly. You want to say that again? Matt looked at the pavement. I want out. There is no out, Kyle said. Nora stepped close to Matt, face pale under the parking lot light. You touched the box. You delivered it. You signed the intake slip as family representative. If we go down, you go first. Matt swallowed. Kyle opened the truck bed cover. Inside were 2 more boxes and a black case I recognized immediately. Grandpa's shadow box. My heart kicked hard enough to hurt. Nora lifted 1 donation jar and poured cash into a bank envelope. We will tell people the auction house recovered them from an anonymous tip. Then we keep the donations for Dad's care. Kyle laughed. Dad's care. For bills, she hissed. Your boutique bills. She slapped him. The sound cracked across the parking lot. I had my phone up by then, recording through rain-speckled glass. It was not perfect. It would never satisfy a defense attorney by itself, but it was enough to make them nervous, and nervous people make mistakes. Matt saw my phone first. His eyes widened. Ben, he said. Nora spun. Kyle lunged toward my truck. I hit the locks and started the engine, but he slammed both hands on the hood. His face appeared over the windshield, twisted and wet. "You want to play spy?" he shouted. Nora grabbed his arm. "Not here." I backed out hard, tires slipping. Kyle jumped aside. My bumper clipped a trash can, sending it rolling across the lot. I drove 2 blocks before pulling into a gas station under bright lights, hands shaking. The video had saved. I sent it to Officer Bell, Tessa, and Mr. before I could talk myself out of it. Then Matt called. I answered without speaking. "I'm sorry," he said. I laughed, short and ugly. "That fixes everything." "No, it doesn't. Why did you do it?" He was quiet so long, I thought he had hung up. "Nora said you were draining Grandpa's accounts," he said. "She said the medals were going to be sold anyway to pay for care, but you wanted control. She said if I helped move them to the auction house, we could keep them safe from you. You believed that." At first, his voice broke. Then Kyle paid me $500 and told me not to ask questions. "There it is." "I know. Where are the medals now?" "In Kyle's truck, but they won't stay there. Nora said she has a private buyer by morning." "Who?" "I don't know. Someone from out of state." I closed my eyes. "Matt, if you want out, go to Officer Bell. Nora will ruin me. She already used you." He breathed shakily. I kept the intake slip. My eyes opened. The one from the auction house, the original. Kyle told me to burn it, but I didn't. Nora signed Grandpa's name on the hood of his truck before we went in. "Do you have proof?" I took a picture because I was scared she'd blame me. For a moment, the gas station lights looked unreal. "Send it." "I will, but Ben's." "What?" "She's going to try to get you barred from seeing Grandpa tomorrow. She said once he signs the care transfer, the house and everything in it becomes easier." "What care transfer?" "The long-term placement papers." My stomach turned. Grandpa had warned me. "She'll come with papers." The medals were not the prize. They were practice. Ridgeway smelled different the next morning. Not cleaner, sharper. Like the building knew a fight was coming and had sprayed citrus over fear. I arrived before visiting hours with coffee for the nurses and copies of everything in a folder pressed against my ribs. Officer Bell had replied to my videos at 1:12 a.m. "Do not confront them. We are reviewing." I understood his caution. I also understood that Nora moved faster than procedure. She was already in Grandpa's room. So was a social worker, a notary, and doctor. The rehab physician whose shoes always looked too expensive for a man who claimed insurance companies controlled everything. Grandpa sat in his wheelchair wearing a cardigan he hated. Nora stood behind him with both hands on the chair handles like she owned the brakes. "Ben," doctor said, surprised. "We were just discussing discharge planning." At 7:40 in the morning. Nora smiled. "Dad gets tired later." The social worker, Ms. Price, held a packet. "Your grandfather may need extended assisted living support. He wants to go home." Grandpa looked at me, eyes cloudy but alert beneath it. "Home has my tools." Nora bent near his ear. "Daddy, we talked about this. Home isn't safe right now." "Because you keep stealing things from it," I said. The notary froze. Nora inhaled sharply. "This is exactly the emotional volatility I warned you about." I placed the folder on the bedside table. "She is trying to move him into long-term care while the theft investigation is active." Ms. Price frowned. "The documents today are preliminary." "Then why is there a notary?" No one answered quickly enough. Nora recovered. "Dad asked me to help manage his property while he heals." Grandpa's hand tightened on the wheelchair arm. "Did you?" I asked him. His eyes moved to Nora, then to me. Fear passed through them, and I hated her for putting it there. "I don't want trouble," he whispered. Nora looked triumphant. "See." I knelt in front of him. "Grandpa, trouble already came. You don't have to sign anything to make it polite." The doctor cleared his throat. "Mr. Walker, your sister has expressed concern that your presence agitates him. I bring his laundry and pay his bills, and accuse family members in front of him," Nora said. I opened the folder and set out the first photo. Nora in the garage at 10:42 p.m. The second, Kyle carrying the shadow box. The third, Nora signing on the hood of Grandpa's truck, captured by Matt's shaky phone. The room changed. Not dramatically, real life rarely gives violins. It changed in the tiny ways guilty people hate. Ms. Price stopped flipping pages. The notary leaned forward. Doctor took off his glasses. Nora stared at the photos, then laughed softly. Ben edited these. From 2 different cameras. You've always been good with computers. I can barely update Grandpa's printer. Grandpa made a sound that might have been a laugh. Ms. Price picked up the garage still. Mrs. Dalton, is this you? Nora's face hardened. I entered my father's home to secure valuables because Ben had been acting suspiciously. With Kyle and Matt, I asked. Wearing gloves. We were protecting Dad. By telling the auction house he was dead. Doctor looked sharply at Nora. She turned on me. You don't get to judge me. You liked being the hero. You liked everyone saying Ben takes such good care of him. Meanwhile, I'm the daughter. I'm the one who should have been making decisions. There it is, I said quietly. Nora realized too late she had stepped out of the grieving daughter costume. Grandpa's voice cut through the room, thin but steady. My medals were not decisions. Everyone looked at him. He lifted his shaking hand and pointed at Nora. You asked value, I wrote it. I pulled out the notebook pages. Nora's eyes widened. That book is private. So was his house. Ms. Price gathered the unsigned papers. We are postponing any transfer discussion pending review. The notary closed her stamp case. Doctor said, I think we all need to take a breath. Nora leaned down until her mouth was inches from my ear. Her whisper was colder than any shout. You think this makes you safe? I looked at Grandpa, who was staring at her like he finally saw the stranger wearing his daughter's face. No, I said, I think it makes you desperate. She left without crying. That scared me more than her tears. Grandpa came home on a Thursday. Not because Ridgway thought he was fully ready. Not because Nora agreed. He came home because Ms. Price arranged temporary in-home support. Officer Bell advised that keeping him away from contested property might complicate matters. And Mr. showed up at the discharge meeting wearing his VFW cap and the expression of a man prepared to outstubborn a building. I installed a ramp with 2 neighbors. Tessa brought soup. Mr. brought a baseball bat and said it was for reaching high shelves. Grandpa cried when we rolled him into the living room. He did not cry loudly. Grandpa had never believed in spending pain where strangers could hear. But when he saw the pale rectangle above the fireplace, his mouth folded inward and tears slipped down both cheeks. I'm sorry, I said. He shook his head. Empty wall tells truth too. That night, after the nurse left, he asked for the garage. Tomorrow, I said, you're exhausted. Garage, he repeated. So I helped him into his coat, pushed the wheelchair over the threshold, and guided him down the ramp into the cold. The garage light flickered when I pulled the chain. Sawdust glittered in the air. Tools hung in their places. Grandpa breathed like a man entering church after a fire. Bench drawer, he said. I opened the long drawer under the workbench. Inside were pencils, old receipts, washers, 2 measuring tapes, and a red ledger book bound with a rubber band. Nora had missed it because Nora only recognized value when someone told her a price. Grandpa, read. I opened the ledger. The first pages listed the medals, not by market value, but by memory. Bronze star, not mine alone, Harris. Purple ribbon, refused, survived. Letter from Mrs., a return copy to museum file. Flag, no sale, no private collector, no wall of strangers. Then came dates. Nora asking about appraisal. Kyle asking whether old army stuff counted as personal property. Matt asking where shadow box key was kept. Grandpa had written everything, short sentences, clear, sometimes misspelled, sometimes repeated, but unmistakable. The last page stopped me. If Ben is blamed, check garage west wall and bank envelope under flour tin. Nora smiles when lying. Kyle looks at the floor, Matt sweats. A laugh escaped me, then turned into something else. Grandpa watched me, funny because true. You knew. I suspected. He stared at the workbench, didn't want to know. That was the saddest sentence he had ever said to me. In the kitchen, I found the bank envelope under the flour tin, exactly where he said it would be. Inside were copies of letters between Grandpa and the Regional Veterans Museum. They had been discussing a future donation of the medals, with conditions: after his death, family access to view, full names attached to stories, no sale. There was also a copy of a letter to Nora. Nora, I know you think objects are wasted if they do not solve a bill. These medals are not money. Do not ask again. Dad. He never sent it. That hurt too. At 9, a car slowed outside the house. I looked through the curtain and saw Kyle's truck roll past without lights. It did not stop. It did not need to. The message was clear: we know you are home. I called Officer Bell. He said they had spoken with and were preparing warrants for financial records. The auction house had suspended Lot 214 indefinitely. Matt had agreed to give a statement if granted limited immunity. What about Nora? I asked. We'll interview her again. Again. Ben, cases take time. Nora doesn't. He did not argue. Before bed, I checked the garage cameras. Grandpa sat beside me at the kitchen table, wrapped in a blanket, watching the monitor like an old general studying maps. At 9:37 p.m., the west camera caught Kyle walking along the fence line. He paused near the garage, looked up at the camera, and smiled. Then he reached into his pocket and held up Grandpa's missing house key. Grandpa's face did not change. Let him come, he said. No, not to fight, he the red ledger, to finish lying. I realized then that Grandpa was not only recovering, he was planning. And Nora, who had spent her life mistaking kindness for weakness, was about to learn the difference. They came at 2:16 in the morning because thieves trust exhaustion. I was asleep in the recliner beside the living room window, one ear trained for Grandpa's bell, when my phone vibrated against my chest. The camera app flashed, Motion Garage West. On the screen, Kyle moved like a shadow along the side door, hood up, shoulders hunched. Behind him came Nora in dark jeans and a coat. Matt was not with them. That, more than anything, told me fear had finally made him smarter. Grandpa's bedroom door creaked. I turned. He was awake, sitting up, blanket over his knees, eyes shining in the dark. They're here, I whispered. I know. How? House knows. Kyle used the stolen key, but the side door did not open. I had changed the lock that afternoon after the camera caught him with the old one. On the feed, he cursed silently and pulled out a pry bar. I called 911 first, then Officer Bell's direct number, then Mr., because if anyone could arrive before police with coffee and a bat, it was him. Nora whispered something to Kyle. He shook his head and the pry bar near the frame. Grandpa gripped the edge of his blanket. They'll say they came to check on me. Let them say it to the cameras. The wood splintered. I turned on every light in the house. Kyle froze. Through the garage speaker system, Grandpa had years ago to yell at raccoons. I pressed talk and said, smile. Nora's face snapped toward the camera. For one perfect second, she looked exactly as she was. No tears, no trembling mouth, just fury. Ben, she shouted, open this door. Why? Dad called me. Grandpa wheeled himself into the kitchen doorway. His voice was thin, but carried through the speaker because I held the phone near him. Did not. Nora flinched. Daddy, you're confused. Go back to bed. He leaned forward. I am old, Nora, not furniture. Kyle raised the pry bar again. Then headlights swept across the driveway. Not police. Mr. in his ancient, parking diagonally behind Kyle's truck like a barricade. He stepped out wearing slippers, a coat, and his VFW cap. In one hand was the baseball bat. In the other was a thermos. Nora yelled, this is family business. Mr. said, then stop committing it outside. The police arrived 3 minutes later. Those 3 minutes lasted a year. Kyle tried to explain that they were checking on Grandpa's welfare because I was isolating him. Nora cried on cue. She told Officer Bell she had received a confusing voicemail from her father. She said I had manipulated an old man into fearing his own daughter. Then Grandpa rolled onto the porch ramp under the floodlight. He had insisted. I argued. He won by looking at me like I was one more person trying to decide what he could handle. Officer Bell knelt. Mr. Walker, did you call your daughter tonight? No. Did you ask her to enter the garage? No. Nora, Daddy, don't do this. Grandpa turned toward her. You did this before, I named it. Kyle was arrested for attempted unlawful entry and possession of a stolen key. Nora was not. She stood in the driveway wrapped in a foil blanket, telling the second officer that stress had made everyone misunderstand. But Officer Bell took the pry bar. He took the key. He took the camera files. He took my phone with the 911 recording. As they led Kyle to the cruiser, he twisted toward Nora. Tell them about the storage unit. Nora's sobbing stopped. Every head turned. Kyle realized what he had done. Officer Bell did too. What storage unit? He asked. Nora said nothing. Grandpa whispered, there's the next door. By sunrise, Bell had a warrant request. By noon, Matt had called twice asking whether telling the truth now still counted. By evening, the auction house admitted the medals had been removed from their building for temporary safekeeping by the consignor after the pause. And by Friday morning, the police opened Unit 41 behind a self-storage facility on Route 6. Inside were Grandpa's medals, the shadow box, 3 donation jars from the Veterans Hall, Kyle's unpaid bills, and a stack of blank notary forms. But the worst thing was on top of the boxes. A printed sign. Estate sale, Arthur Walker, deceased. Grandpa was alive when they printed his death to sell his life. The local paper called it a family dispute involving military memorabilia. That phrase was so small it felt obscene. A family dispute is who brings potato salad. A family dispute is 2 cousins arguing over politics until someone hides the wine. What Nora did was not a dispute. She stole from a living veteran, lied about his death, framed the person caring for him, raised money off the crime, and then tried to force him out of his own house through fear and paperwork. But newspapers like clean phrases. Nora liked them too. Her lawyer released a statement saying she had acted under extreme emotional distress while attempting to preserve family assets during a medical emergency. Preserve assets, emergency. 3 words, wearing suits. The charges took shape slowly: theft, fraud, attempted sale of stolen property, elder financial exploitation, filing false statements. Kyle collected his own list. Matt, shaking and pale, gave a full statement and surrendered the original auction intake slip. Aunt stopped calling me. Then she called too much. I didn't know, she said the first time. You didn't ask. That's not fair. No, fair would have been not believing Grandpa. She cried. I did not comfort her. That felt cruel for about 12 seconds, then honest. Grandpa listened to all of it from his recliner beneath the empty wall. We had not put up a replacement shadow box. He said the wall should stay empty until the medals came back properly. Reporters called, veterans groups called. A museum curator called, not because of the scandal, but because Grandpa had written to him months earlier. His name was Dr. Samuel Reed, and when he visited, he did not ask how much the medals were worth. He asked Grandpa about the men in the ledger. Grandpa talked for 2 hours. Sometimes he forgot a name and found it again by circling a memory. Sometimes he cried without apology. Dr. Reed took notes gently, like he knew he was handling glass. Afterward, Grandpa said, "That man understands weight." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for Monday. Nora's lawyer tried to keep Grandpa from testifying, claiming stress and cognitive impairment. Ms. Price submitted her own report, noting that Grandpa's memory fluctuated, but his preferences and records were consistent. Doctor, suddenly cautious, agreed. Nora sent me one text. You are destroying this family. I stared at it for a long time before replying. No, I stopped letting you use that word as cover. She did not respond. On Sunday night, Grandpa asked me to drive him to the Veterans Hall. I thought he wanted to sit in the empty room before court, but he directed me to the back office, where Mr. unlocked a cabinet. Inside was a framed photograph of Grandpa's old unit. Grandpa pointed at the men. "That's Harris, that's before the fire." His hand trembled. "I carried those medals wrong," he said. "What do you mean?" "Kept them in a box like a treasure. Should have told the stories louder." "You did tell me." "Not enough." Mr. stood by the door, eyes wet. Grandpa turned to me. "Tomorrow they will ask if I am confused." "Yes, I am." The honesty hit harder than any denial. He continued, "Some mornings I wake up in 1970. Some nights I think your grandmother is in the kitchen, but I know who stole from me." I swallowed. "That's enough. I know who stayed." I looked away. Grandpa reached for my hand. "Loyalty is not loud. That's why liars talk over it." The next day, Nora arrived at court in navy blue with pearls and no wedding ring, separating herself from Kyle before the cameras could separate them for her. She looked smaller than she had at the Veterans Hall. Not sorry, smaller. When she saw Grandpa in his wheelchair, she pressed a tissue to her mouth. This time, no one moved to comfort her. Courtroom benches are not kind rooms. They make every whisper sound like paper tearing. I sat behind Grandpa, the red ledger in my lap, the empty wall still burning behind my eyes. Nora turned once before the hearing began. Her look said the old thing, "You should have taken the blame." For years, that look had worked on people. Then Grandpa lifted his shaking hand, pointed at her, and said clearly enough for the first row to hear, "My daughter buried me early." The courtroom went still, and for once, Nora had no script. The prosecutor's name was Ms. Vance, and she spoke like someone who had no patience for pretty lies. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform outrage. She simply placed documents into the record one by one until Nora's story began to look ridiculous under the weight of paper. Auction intake slip. Paused listing. Garage footage stills. Matt's statement. Messages. Storage unit inventory. Veterans Hall donation sheet. The fake estate sales sign. Nora's lawyer objected so often the judge stopped looking surprised. He argued chain of custody. He argued family misunderstanding. He argued that adult children often make hard decisions when elderly parents resist reality. I watched Grandpa's jaw tighten every time the lawyer said elderly like it meant already halfway gone. Then they played the garage footage. Not all of it, just enough. The courtroom monitor showed Nora entering the garage with Kyle and Matt. It showed the shadow box wrapped in Grandma's quilt. It showed Kyle wiping the glass. It showed Matt holding the door. Nora looked down. Kyle, sitting 2 seats away in a county-issued suit, looked at Nora. Matt looked like he might vomit. The judge leaned forward. "Is the gentleman in this footage the alleged incapacitated owner?" he asked dryly. "No, Your Honor," Ms. Vance said. "Mr. Arthur Walker was hospitalized in rehab at the time. And alive. Very much alive." A sound moved through the courtroom. Not laughter, not quite. The sound people make when shame finds a room. Nora's lawyer tried to frame it as safekeeping. "My client believed Mr. Ben Walker posed a risk to these items." Ms. Vance clicked to the next exhibit. Nora's signed auction document declaring she was acting for the estate of Arthur J. Walker. The judge removed his glasses. Counsel, safekeeping generally does not involve declaring the owner deceased. Nora closed her eyes. Then Grandpa. They rolled him to the witness area, and for a moment he looked painfully small. His suit hung off his shoulders. His hands trembled. The courtroom saw age before it saw him. Nora's lawyer saw opportunity. "Mr. Walker," he began gently, "do you sometimes become confused?" Grandpa looked at him. "Yes." The lawyer paused, almost pleased. "Do you sometimes forget dates?" "Yes." "Names?" "Some." "Then is it possible you authorized your daughter to secure and sell these medals, but later forgot?" Grandpa sat very still. My hands curled around the red ledger. "No," he said. The lawyer smiled politely. How can you be certain? Grandpa lifted his chin. Because those medals are not mine to sell. The room held its breath. He continued slowly. Men died, I got old. That is not ownership, that is debt. Ms. Vance let the silence work. Nora's lawyer did not. But your written records indicate concern about your memory. Isn't it possible your grandson Ben influenced what you wrote? Grandpa looked past him to me, then back. Ben brought groceries, Nora brought appraisers. A few people in the back shifted. The lawyer's smile thinned. You understand your daughter says she acted out of love. Grandpa turned toward Nora. She was crying now, real tears. Maybe it no longer mattered. Love does not need gloves, Grandpa said. That sentence ended the hearing, even though court continued another hour. The judge ordered Nora and Kyle to surrender passports, cease contact with Grandpa except through counsel, and refrain from accessing his property or accounts. The medals were to remain in evidence pending chain verification and eventual return. Adult Protective Services recommended I remain temporary caregiver with oversight rather than removal. Temporary oversight. Words that would have offended me a month earlier sounded like mercy now. Outside, reporters waited. Nora pushed through them, head down. Kyle shouted that I had manipulated an old man. Nobody listened. Aunt stood near the courthouse steps. She looked older than she had the week before. I'm sorry, she said. Grandpa, beside me in his wheelchair, looked at her for a long time. Sorry is a seed, he said. Don't call it a tree yet. Aunt began to cry. Grandpa to me, take me home. On the drive back, he watched bare trees flicker past the window. The sky was silver, cold and clean. He said, yes. When medals come back, no more walls. What do you want to do with them? He closed his eyes. Tell the dead where they're going. For the first time since the shadow box disappeared, the empty wall in my mind did not look like a wound. It looked like space waiting for truth. Nora did what Nora always did when one story failed. She wrote another. By Tuesday morning, her Facebook post had been shared more than 200 times. It showed a photo of her as a child sitting on Grandpa's lap. Her caption said she had been silenced by a male relative who weaponized partial footage, manipulated a vulnerable father, and turned a private family crisis into public humiliation. She never named me. Again, she did not have to. Some people believed her because belief is often less about facts than identity. To them, Nora was a daughter under pressure. I was an unmarried son who lived too close to an inheritance. Grandpa was sweet but confused. Kyle was rough around the edges. Matt was weak. The medals were symbols, yes, but also old objects. Why destroy a family over old objects? That phrase appeared in the comments. Old objects. I read it aloud to Grandpa by mistake. I stopped halfway through, but he waved me on. Good, he said. Let stupid words breathe. The post might have worked if Nora had stopped there. But she was addicted to applause. She agreed to an interview with a local channel called County Truth Now, which usually covered school board fights and restaurant rumors. The host, a man named Dean with a microphone too large for his face, promoted it as daughter SBAKS out after medal scandal. Tessa sent me the link with one message. She is digging down. Nora sat under soft lighting in her boutique office, wearing cream and gold. Behind her, shelves of candles and folded scarves made her look curated, expensive, harmless. Dean opened with, Nora, people are saying terrible things. What do you want them to know? She took a trembling breath. That I love my father. I almost closed the laptop. Grandpa said, leave it. Nora told the camera that she had found the medals at risk, unsecured in a home where certain people came and went. She claimed Grandpa had often expressed fear that I would sell family items. She claimed the auction was only a valuation step. She claimed the estate wording was a clerical error. Then Dean asked about the storage unit. Her face tightened. That was Kyle, she said. Kyle apparently had become disposable. She said her husband had misunderstood her intentions. She said the donation jars were for legitimate care expenses. She said Matt had lied to protect himself. She said she had been punished for being the only child willing to make hard choices. Grandpa listened without expression until she said, "My father doesn't always know what is best for him." He reached over and closed the laptop. The room went quiet. "She thinks age is a door she can lock from outside," he said. That evening, Officer Bell called. Nora's interview had created a problem for Nora. She had described details of the auction documents not publicly filed and contradicted her own statement about never seeing the estate wording before submission. Ms. Vance wanted copies of everything. Nora's need to be believed had become evidence, but the damage still spread. "Someone keyed my truck outside the grocery store." A note tucked under the wiper said thief. At Grandpa's house, a woman from Nora's church left a casserole and a pamphlet about forgiveness. The casserole went into the trash. The pamphlet stayed on the counter because Grandpa wanted to underline things that annoyed him. On Thursday, came to the house. He stood on the porch holding his hat, looking smaller without his display cases behind him. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You owe Grandpa one." Grandpa sat in his recliner, blanket over his legs, eyes sharp, stepped inside as if entering a courtroom. "Mr. Walker," he said, "I nearly bought what I had no right to own." Grandpa studied him, continued, "I told myself preservation justified purchase. It did not." Grandpa, "Once, you like history." "Yes, sir." "Then stop collecting endings, help keep names attached." Swallowed, "I can donate to the museum fund." "No," Grandpa's voice was firm, "donate work. Money washes guilt too easy." So agreed to help catalog the medals properly once returned under Dr. Reed's supervision. It was more than I expected and less than forgiveness. Maybe that was right. After left, Grandpa asked for the laptop. "You sure?" "Yes." We reopened Nora's interview. Comments had shifted. Clips from the court hearing had leaked. People were quoting Grandpa's line, "Love does not need gloves." Nora's supporters were quieter now. Grandpa watched for a while, then said, "Public shame is cheap. Court is better." "It still feels good." He almost smiled. "I didn't say don't enjoy cheap." For the first time in weeks, we laughed like we were allowed to. But later, after Grandpa went to bed, I checked the garage cameras and saw headlights stop across the street. A car idled there for 6 minutes. I could not see the driver. The next morning, a brick lay in the driveway. Wrapped around it was a note. "Drop the case, or Grandpa loses more than medals." Fear changes a house. It makes the hallway longer at night. It turns every branch against a window into a hand. It makes you memorize the sound of tires, pipes, the refrigerator, your own breathing. Grandpa pretended not to be afraid because pride was the last uniform he still wore. But after the brick, he began checking the locks twice. He kept his cane beside the recliner even when he used the walker. He asked whether the garage camera saved sound. It did not. He said that was a design flaw. Officer Bell took the brick, the note, and my statement. He was angry in the controlled way good officers get when a case stops being paperwork and starts threatening old men. "Do you think Kyle sent it?" I asked. "Kyle's out on bond but wearing a monitor. He claims he was home." "Nora, she denies everything." "Shocking." Bell looked at the road. Could be someone stirred up by the... Meaning Nora had lit a match and now claimed innocence because she did not personally hold every flame. The prosecutor requested stricter conditions. Nora's lawyer called it harassment. The judge scheduled another hearing. Meanwhile, Grandpa's house became a bunker made of casseroles, camera alerts, and neighbors pretending to walk dogs they did not own so they could watch the street. Then Matt came by. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes red, shoulders collapsed inward. I almost shut the door in his face, but Grandpa called from the living room, "Let the sweating one in." Matt flinched. He stood near the kitchen table and cried before he spoke. Not Nora crying. Ugly crying. The kind that gives nothing back to the person doing it. "I wrote the note," he said. I went still. Grandpa's hand tightened around his cane. Matt raised both palms. "Not the brick. Nora did that. I wrote the words." "Why?" I asked. "Because she said, if you got scared and dropped the case, she wouldn't tell the police I helped forge the notary witness line. Silence thickened. You witnessed the fake signature, I said. He's sobbing harder. I didn't sign Grandpa's name, Nora did, but I signed that I saw him sign. Kyle said it was just a backup authorization. Nora said Dad had already agreed but couldn't come in because of rehab. Grandpa closed his eyes. Matt whispered, I'm sorry, Uncle Arthur. Grandpa opened them. Sorry is crowded lately. Matt pulled a folded paper from his jacket. I have the draft, the first one, with Kyle's notes, and a video. A video, I asked. He of Nora practicing Dad's signature. For a second, even the house seemed to stop making noise. Matt placed a thumb drive on the table, like it might explode. Why now, I asked. Because she's going to blame Kyle for everything. Then Kyle will blame me. And because, he looked at Grandpa, because I saw the picture of Private's letter in the paper. My grandfather was in Korea. I kept thinking, what if someone sold his flag while he was still breathing? Grandpa stared at him long enough to make him squirm. Then he said, thinking late is better than never, barely. We called Officer Bell. This time, chain of custody was handled in the kitchen with gloves, forms, signatures, and Matt repeating everything while his hands shook. The video on the thumb drive showed Nora at her boutique desk, practicing Grandpa's signature on tracing paper. Kyle's voice was off camera. Make the W, Nora said. If it's too shaky, they'll think he couldn't consent. Then she laughed. Not loudly. Worse, casually. Grandpa did not watch the whole thing. He asked me to stop after the laugh. That's enough, he said. Ms. Vance added forgery and witness tampering to the case. Nora was arrested the next afternoon at her boutique, between a display of candles labeled Serenity and a rack of scarves marked Final Sale. Someone filmed it. The video spread faster than Nora's interview. I expected satisfaction to feel cleaner. Instead, it felt like standing in a room after a storm and realizing the roof still leaked. That night, Grandpa asked me whether I hated her. Yes, I said before I could dress it up. Good means you know where the fire is. Do you? He looked toward the empty wall. I hate what she fed inside herself until it got bigger than blood. That was Grandpa. Even furious, he named the wound instead of pretending the person was only wound. The next morning, Dr. Reed called. The medals were cleared for return under protective custody before transfer to the museum process, pending court approval. They would come home for one day so Grandpa could verify every piece. One day, the house seemed to breathe again. But Nora's final trick was waiting in a bank folder none of us knew existed yet. The bank manager looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Her name was, and she had known Grandpa for 30 years. She had approved his small business loan in 1988 when he bought the house next door and turned the garage into a repair shop. She had sent flowers when Grandma died. She had once told me Grandpa's handwriting was nicer than most wedding invitations. Now she sat across from us with a folder marked legal review. I'm sorry, Arthur, she said. Grandpa wore his best jacket. The medals were due back that afternoon, and he had insisted on going to the bank first because something in Nora's arrest coverage had bothered him. In one clip, she shouted, "Check the beneficiary papers," before police guided her into the car. At the time, I thought it was panic. Grandpa thought it was a map. Opened the folder. There was a change of beneficiary form submitted for your safe deposit box contents and several personal accounts. My stomach dropped. When? I asked. 3 weeks ago. Grandpa was in rehab 3 weeks ago. Looked at him, eyes wet. It bears your signature, Arthur, and Nora Dalton is listed as primary recipient of personal military effects, memorabilia, and household heirlooms. Grandpa's jaw flexed. Military effects, memorabilia, household heirlooms, words designed to make theft sound administrative. Who filed it? I asked. It was delivered by your daughter with notarized authorization. We flagged it because the signature differed from your historical samples, but before review was completed, she requested an appointment to close the box. Did you allow it? No, looked offended by the idea. I told her you would need to appear in person or provide physician-certified incapacity documents. Grandpa murmured, she came with papers. Yes, I said, she did. Handed us copies for law enforcement. On the second page, Nora had listed specific items: medals, service records, letters, flag, watch, silver frame, garage equipment, tools, personal journals. The red ledger would have been next. Grandpa read the list slowly. His hands shook harder with each line. She my life while I was learning to walk again, he said. Covered her mouths. At the police station, Officer Bell added the bank folder to the mountain. Ms. Vance said the pattern mattered. A single theft could be explained as bad judgment. A web of forged documents, staged incapacity, attempted account access, donation fraud, and intimidation showed intent. Intent. Another clean legal word for hunger. The medals came home at 4 that afternoon. Officer Bell brought them with Dr. Reed and 2 representatives from the Veterans Museum. The shadow box was scratched, and the quilt Nora used to wrap it had a grease stain. Grandpa touched the glass but did not open it. Count, he said. Dr. Reed laid each piece on a felt cloth at the dining table. Bronze star, ribbons, unit pins, photographs, letter, flag, watch. Every object matched the ledger. Grandpa listened to each item like roll call. When Dr. Reed reached the letter from Mrs., Grandpa asked me to read it. I had read it before, many times, but never with a room listening. Dear Sergeant Walker, they tell me Daniel did not suffer long. They tell me you carried him though you were hurt yourself. A mother cannot repay that. I can only ask you to remember he was funny, stubborn, afraid of bees, and loved peach pie. If you ever feel you did not carry enough, please know you carried what was left of my world. My voice broke. Grandpa closed his eyes. No one spoke for a long time. Then he said, that's why they don't go to SWAL. Dr. Reed, they'll go with the story, Mr. Walker, not as trophies. But Grandpa opened his eyes. Not yet. Everyone looked at him. One more place first, he said. The Veterans Hall. He wanted the medals displayed there for one night. Not for Nora, not for reporters, not for applause. For the men whose names he had kept in a ledger while his own family tried to price them by lot number. The prosecutor approved under supervision. The museum agreed. Officer Bell looked like he might cry and pretended to check his phone. Nora's lawyer objected in writing within an hour. The judge denied it in one sentence. The owner is alive and may honor his property as he chooses. Grandpa read that sentence 3 times. Then he smiled. Not big, not triumphant, just enough. Alive, he said. One word. A verdict of its own. The Veterans Hall was full by 6. This time, there were no donation jars. Mr. stood at the entrance like a bouncer with bifocals. Tessa arranged chairs. From the bank brought a box of tissues and pretended it was for everyone else. Officer Bell stood near the back in plain clothes, which fooled no one. The medals sat in the center of the room on a table covered in navy cloth, not locked behind glass. Not yet. Dr. Reed had arranged them with labels that told stories instead of prices. Bronze Star awarded to Arthur J. Walker, held in memory of Daniel, James Harris, and Peter. Letter from Reed with family permission, archived by the museum. Flag Unit Remembrance Ceremony, 1972. Grandpa sat beside the table in his wheelchair, wearing his suit, and the VFW cap Mr. had bullied him into accepting. He looked tired, but not weak. There is a difference people like Nora never learn. Aunt came. She stood in the doorway for 10 minutes before entering. Matt came too, pale and quiet, sitting in the last row. Stood near the wall, hands folded, looking at the medals without leaning too close. Then Nora appeared. The room tightened. She was allowed to attend only because her lawyer petitioned for it as a step toward family reconciliation, and Grandpa surprised everyone by agreeing. She entered with an ankle monitor hidden under wide pants and a face stripped of performance. No pearls, no tissue, no Kyle. 2 officers stood outside. Nora walked toward Grandpa. The room watched. "Daddy," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "Arthur." She flinched. What? Tonight call me Arthur. Daddy is a word you spent. A few people looked down, embarrassed by the intimacy of the wound. Nora's mouth trembled, and for once I could not tell whether she was acting. I was scared. Bills were piling up, Kyle said. Grandpa raised one hand. No Kyle tonight. She stopped. He continued, no bills, no stress, no hard choices. Say the small word first. Nora stared at him. The room waited. The small word was stealing. She could not say it. That was answer enough. Grandpa turned to Mr. Start. Mr. cleared his throat and introduced Dr. Reed, who spoke briefly about memory, objects, and the danger of stripping artifacts from the lives that gave them meaning. Then Grandpa asked for the microphone. I pushed him forward. His hand shook so badly I held the stand. He thanks without looking at me because public tenderness still embarrassed him. My daughter tried to sell these, he said. No gasp, everyone knew. Hearing him say it made the truth. My grandson Ben was blamed. He looked at me then. He stayed. 2 words, enough to undo weeks of poison. Grandpa turned back to the room. I forgot many things. I will forget more. But I did not forget what honor feels like when someone takes it. I did not forget who carried my laundry. I did not forget who came when there was no audience. Nora covered her mouth. Grandpa's voice thinned, but he kept going. These medals will go to the museum with names attached, not mine alone, theirs, the men who did not get old, the mothers who wrote letters, the friends who carried what was left. He touched the edge of the shadow box. If my family wants inheritance, inherit that. The room rose to its feet. Not thunderous, respectful, the kind of standing that feels less like applause than a promise. Nora did not stand. She sat with her face in her hands. Afterward, people came quietly to the table, asked Dr. Reed how to volunteer cataloging local veterans' items. Aunt me, and did not ask forgiveness out loud, which was the first smart thing she had done in weeks. Matt approached Grandpa, said, "I'm sorry I helped them," and took whatever silence Grandpa gave him without trying to fill it. Nora waited until the hall had thinned. "I did love you," she told Grandpa. He looked exhausted, ancient, kind in a way that did not rescue her. "I know," he said, "that's what makes it worse." She cried then. I believed those tears. I also let the officers walk her out. But justice did not arrive like thunder. It arrived in continuances, plea offers, signatures, court fees, and mornings when Grandpa was too tired to ask what happened next. Kyle pleaded first. Men like Kyle always do when the math turns bad. He admitted to transporting stolen property, attempted unlawful entry, and participating in the forged sale scheme. In exchange, he that Nora planned the auction, practiced the signature, and told him old soldiers don't need trophies in rehab. Nora's lawyer tried to keep that line out. He failed. Matt received probation, community service at the Veterans Museum, and a felony deferred on the forgery witness count because he cooperated, and because Grandpa asked the prosecutor not to ruin a coward who finally faced the right direction. But that was more grace than I had in me. Nora held out until the bank folder made trial dangerous. Then she entered a plea, fraud, elder exploitation, forgery, and attempted sale of stolen property. The donation money had to be repaid. The court barred her from managing Grandpa's affairs. She received jail time, probation, restitution, and a no-contact order unless Grandpa requested otherwise. He did not. At sentencing, the judge asked if Grandpa wanted to speak. He did. I pushed him to the front. He carried 1 page, but he did not read from it. "My daughter made me dead on paper," he said. "That is hard to explain to people who have never seen their own life listed for sale." Nora cried silently at the defense table. Grandpa looked at her only once. "I'm not asking the court to hate her. Hate is a room with no windows, and I've spent enough time in those. I ask the court to understand that age is not permission, confusion is not consent, family is not a receipt you hand someone after taking what you want." Ms. Vance looked down. The judge's voice was rough when he pronounced sentence. No one cheered. That surprised people online later. Clips of the hearing spread because clips always do, and strangers wanted a cleaner ending. They wanted Nora dragged away while Grandpa smiled. They wanted me to say revenge tasted sweet. They wanted villains to shrink into cartoons. But in the courtroom, revenge tasted like metal and old coffee. Nora turned before deputies led her out. "Ben," she said. The judge had already warned against contact, but she said it anyway. I looked at her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I thought about the empty wall, the police report, Grandpa's face in rehab, the donation jars, the forged death, the brick in the driveway, the way she had smiled when the nurse told me to leave. I said nothing. That was the only honest answer I had. Grandpa slept most of the ride home. When we pulled into the driveway, he woke and looked at the house, as if surprised it was still there. "Court done?" he asked. "For now, Nora. Sentenced." He slowly, some days, memory arrived in pieces and left with edges missing, but the shape stayed. "Medals. At the museum next week." "Good." I helped him inside. The living room wall was still empty. The dust outline had faded a little because I had cleaned around it, but you could still see where the shadow box once hung. Grandpa pointed, "Put something there." "What?" He thought for a long time. Photo of Grandma laughing. I found one in the hallway album. Grandma at a picnic, head thrown back, hand over her heart, sunlight in her hair. Grandpa looked at it and smiled like pain had opened a window. We hung it together. The wall changed. Not healed, changed. That evening, Mr. brought chili. Tessa brought bread. From the bank brought paperwork transferring full medical and financial oversight into a structure with checks and co-signatures, so nobody, including me, held too much power alone. I signed gladly. Grandpa watched me sign and said, "Trust with guardrails, best kind." After everyone left, we sat in the living room, the house making its old noises around us. He said, "Yes, if I forget all this, don't tell me every ugly piece again." My throat tightened. "Okay. Tell me the medals went where names stay attached. Tell me Grandma laughed on the wall. Tell me you stayed." "I will." He closed his eyes. "And tell me Nora was my daughter before she was my thief." That one hurt, but I promised. The museum ceremony was small because Grandpa wanted it that way. No cameras from local news. No donation jars. No speeches from people who had discovered him only after scandal made him visible. Just Dr. Reed, 2 museum staff members, Mr. Tessa, Aunt, Matt standing in the back with red eyes, and me beside Grandpa's wheelchair. The medals rested on white cotton. The letter from Mrs. lay in a protective sleeve. The folded flag had been cleaned carefully, not made new. Dr. Reed said restoration should never erase age that belonged to an object. Grandpa liked that. Before signing the donation agreement, he asked for the ledger. I gave it to him. His hands shook too much to write, so he asked me to write while he dictated one final note. "These medals are given to the museum so the names do not travel alone. If anyone asks value, tell them value is the wrong question." He signed beneath it slowly. The A trembled. The W wandered. It was the most beautiful signature in the room. Dr. Reed witnessed it. So did I. Then Grandpa touched each item once. "Not goodbye, roll call." He whispered, "Harris." He paused at his own name on the label. "Arthur," I said softly. He looked at me startled, then smiled. That fellow made it home. After the ceremony, Dr. Reed showed us the display plan. The medals would not be arranged like trophies. They would be part of an exhibit about memory, aging veterans, and the ethics of family-held artifacts. Grandpa's ledger would be digitized. Mrs. Sletter would be excerpted with permission. Visitors would hear audio of Grandpa telling the story of the men, not the scandal. Nora would not be mentioned. That was Grandpa's choice. Why? I asked on the ride home. He watched fields roll past the window. Spring was beginning to soften the edges of winter, because she tried to make herself the center, not giving her the exhibit too. It was the cleanest revenge he ever chose. Months passed. Nora wrote twice from jail. Grandpa did not open the letters. He asked me to place them in a drawer marked later, which in our house meant maybe never, maybe when the heart had more room, maybe when memory changed the shape of pain. Kyle disappeared into whatever men like Kyle do when consequences outlive charm. Matt kept volunteering at the museum. He still sweated when Grandpa looked at him, but he showed up, and sometimes showing up is the first language cowards learn after silence. Aunt came every Sunday with food she actually cooked. She and Grandpa sat together, mostly not talking. That was their apology for a while. It seemed to work better than sentences. The garage camera stayed on, not because we expected more thieves, because Grandpa liked seeing the red light blink above the workbench. He said it reminded him that old things still had jobs. One afternoon, I found him in the garage holding the empty shadow box. "You want to keep it?" I asked. "No." He set it on the bench. Glass remembers fingerprints. "What should we do with it?" He looked around at the tools, the labeled jars, the oil stains, the sawdust caught in the corners of his life. "Put recipes in it." I laughed. "Recipes? Your grandmother's people fight less over." So we did. We mounted the old shadow box in the kitchen and filled it with Grandma's recipe cards. Peach pie, cornbread, apple butter. Across the bottom, Grandpa wrote, "Family is what you feed, not what you take." The handwriting was crooked. Perfect. Sometimes people ask whether I forgave Nora. They ask like forgiveness is a doorbell you ring once before entering peace. I don't know, maybe not. What I know is this: I stopped letting people call my anger bitterness when it was really memory doing its job. I stopped letting family mean unlimited access to my conscience. I stopped confusing quiet loyalty with weakness just because loud liars got heard first. Grandpa still has bad days. Some mornings he asks when Grandma will be home. Some evenings he thinks the war is outside the window. On those days, I do what he asked. I tell him the medals went where names stay attached. I tell him Grandma is laughing on the wall. I tell him I stayed. And sometimes, when the light falls right through the garage window, he looks at the little red camera blinking over the workbench and grins. "Garage watches," he says. "Yes," I tell him. The garage watched the liars. And for once, the truth was not too late.